The year was 1955. Montgomery, Alabama, simmered with unspoken tensions, a place where the color of your skin dictated the course of your life. In the gleaming halls of the Montgomery General Hospital, Dr. Thomas Ashton moved with the confidence of a man accustomed to respect. He was a surgeon, celebrated for his steady hands and sharp mind. He could mend bones, stop bleeding, and coax life back into bodies teetering on the brink. But beneath the starched white coat and the practiced bedside manner lay a darkness, a deep-seated prejudice against black people. It was a poison subtly woven into the fabric of his being, a product of the segregated South he called home. He saw them not as individuals, but as a collective other, inferior and undeserving of the same care and consideration as his white patients. Dr. Ashton justified his views with twisted logic, clinging to outdated notions of racial superiority. He told himself that black people were less intelligent, less hygienic, and less deserving of his valuable time and skill. He believed they were a drain on society, a burden on the hospital's resources. He buried his conscience deep, allowing his prejudice to dictate his actions within the hospital walls. He was a brilliant surgeon, yes, but also a deeply flawed man, blind to his own hypocrisy and the suffering he inflicted. Across town, separated by more than just physical distance, stood Charity Hospital. Unlike the modern Montgomery General, Charity Hospital was a collection of aging brick buildings, its paint peeling and its equipment often outdated. The air hummed with a different kind of energy, a blend of quiet desperation and fierce hope. Charity Hospital served as a lifeline for the black community of Montgomery. It was a place where they could receive medical care without the indignity of blatant discrimination, a place where their lives were valued, even if resources were scarce. But resources were always scarce. The hospital struggled constantly to make ends meet, relying on donations and the tireless dedication of its staff. The halls were often crowded, the waiting room overflowing with patients seeking everything from routine checkups to emergency treatment. Nurses, overworked and underpaid, moved with a quiet grace, offering comfort and care with unwavering compassion. Doctors, many of whom had chosen to practice at Charity despite better opportunities elsewhere, worked tirelessly to provide the best possible care with limited means. The hospital's very existence was a testament to the resilience and determination of the black community and the unwavering commitment of those who served it. It was a beacon of hope in a city shrouded in prejudice, a place where humanity shone brightly, even in the face of adversity. The screech of tires and the shattering of glass pierced the afternoon calm. A cloud of dust swirled near the intersection of Elm Street and Oak Avenue. An ambulance wailed, its siren cutting through the air as it sped towards Montgomery General. Inside, Mr. Elijah Johnson lay unconscious, his body battered and bleeding from a collision with a delivery truck. Elijah, a young man with dreams as bright as the Alabama sun, had been on his way to his evening job at the local printing press. He was saving every penny to attend Tuskegee University, hoping to become an architect. Now, his future hung precariously in the balance. The accident had left him with a severe head injury and multiple broken bones. Every second counted. The ambulance doors swung open, and paramedics rushed Elijah into the emergency room. The gurney rattled down the hallway, a stark counterpoint to the hushed atmosphere of the hospital. Nurses and orderlies scrambled to prepare for his arrival, their faces etched with concern. Elijah's life was now in the hands of the doctors at Montgomery General, a hospital where, unbeknownst to him, his very existence was viewed through the distorted lens of prejudice. The race to save him had begun, but it was a race already burdened by the weight of injustice. Dr. Thomas Ashton was on call that afternoon. He strode into the emergency room, his eyes scanning the scene with practiced efficiency. He saw the flurry of activity surrounding the gurney, the blood-soaked bandages, the anxious faces of the medical staff. He knew, instantly, that this was a critical case. Then, his gaze landed on Elijah's face. The color drained from his own cheeks, not from concern, but from a surge of cold disdain. He paused, a flicker of internal conflict crossing his features before being quickly suppressed. He wouldn't treat him. "What's the situation?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Nurse Davies, her brow furrowed with worry, rattled off the list of injuries. "Severe head trauma, multiple fractures. He needs immediate surgery, Doctor." Dr. Ashton nodded slowly, then offered a carefully constructed excuse. "I'm scheduled for a complex surgery in the next hour. I can't possibly take on another case like this right now." "Find Dr. Miller. He's better suited for this type of trauma anyway." It was a lie, of course. Dr. Miller was off duty. Dr. Ashton knew it. He was using his position, his authority, to deny Elijah the care he desperately needed, all because of the color of his skin. He turned and walked away, leaving Elijah's fate hanging precariously in the balance, his conscience conveniently silenced by years of ingrained prejudice. He told himself he was simply prioritizing his patients, protecting his reputation, but deep down, he knew the truth. He was abandoning a dying man because of hate. Nurse Sarah watched in disbelief as Dr. Ashton walked away. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of anger and fear churning within her. She had witnessed Dr. Ashton's subtle biases before, the dismissive glances, the curt responses, but this was different. This was a blatant disregard for human life, masked by a flimsy lie. Sarah was a beacon of compassion in the often sterile environment of the hospital. She saw every patient as an individual, regardless of their race or social standing. She had dedicated her life to caring for others, and she refused to stand by and watch Elijah die because of Dr. Ashton's prejudice. She hurried after him, her footsteps echoing in the hallway. "Dr. Ashton, with all due respect," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Dr. Miller is off duty. This man needs surgery now. You're the only one who can help him." Dr. Ashton stopped, his back to her. "I told you, nurse. I have another surgery scheduled." "That's not true, doctor." "And you know it," Sarah retorted, her voice gaining strength. "This man is dying. Please, I'm begging you, put aside your personal feelings and do your job." Dr. Ashton turned, his eyes cold and hard. "Are you questioning my judgment, nurse?" Sarah stood her ground. "I'm questioning your humanity, doctor." She knew she was risking her job, but she couldn't remain silent. Seeing she wouldn't sway him, Sarah rushed to the phone, frantically calling other doctors, hoping against hope to find someone available to operate. Time was slipping away, and Elijah's chances of survival dwindled with each passing moment. Sarah's frantic calls yielded nothing but disappointment. One doctor was out of town, another was attending a conference, and the rest were unavailable for various reasons. The on-call schedule was thin on weekends, a chronic problem exacerbated by the hospital's limited resources. Each unanswered call was a hammer blow to Sarah's hope. Back in the emergency room, Elijah's condition was rapidly deteriorating. His breathing became shallow and labored, his pulse weak and erratic. The monitors beeped ominously, reflecting the growing crisis. The nurses worked tirelessly, administering fluids and medications, trying to stabilize him, but they knew it was a losing battle without surgery. Nurse Davies, her face etched with worry, approached Sarah. "He's crashing, Sarah. We're losing him." Sarah's eyes filled with tears of frustration and helplessness. She felt a profound sense of guilt, as if she had personally failed Elijah. She had done everything she could, but it wasn't enough. The weight of her powerlessness was crushing. The silence in the room was broken only by the beeping monitors and the ragged breaths of a young man slipping away, a life needlessly sacrificed on the altar of prejudice. The room felt heavy with despair, a stark reminder of the injustice that permeated their society. The ticking clock seemed to mock their efforts, each second a step closer to tragedy. Just as despair threatened to engulf the emergency room, Mr. Peterson, the hospital administrator, arrived. He was a tall, imposing man, usually radiating an air of calm authority. Today, however, his face was creased with worry, his brow furrowed with concern. He had been summoned from his weekend at home, alerted to the unfolding crisis by an urgent phone call. Mr. Peterson was a pragmatic man, acutely aware of the hospital's precarious financial situation and its dependence on community support. He understood the delicate balance he had to maintain in a racially charged environment. He strived to ensure the hospital provided the best possible care to all patients, regardless of their background, while navigating the complex social and political landscape of the South. He strode purposefully into the emergency room, his eyes immediately drawn to the activity surrounding Elijah's gurney. He could sense the tension in the air, the unspoken fear that hung heavy in the room. He approached Nurse Sarah, his voice low and urgent. "What's the situation, nurse? I heard there was an incident." Sarah, her voice choked with emotion, quickly explained the situation, detailing Dr. Ashton's refusal to treat Elijah and the unsuccessful attempts to find another surgeon. Mr. Peterson's face grew darker with each word. He understood the implications of Dr. Ashton's actions, not only for Elijah, but for the hospital itself. This could be a disaster. He had to act quickly. Mr. Peterson, his face grim, found Dr. Ashton in the doctor's lounge, calmly sipping a cup of coffee. The administrator's presence filled the small room, radiating a palpable sense of displeasure. "Dr. Ashton," Mr. Peterson began, his voice low but firm, "I need to understand what's happening in the emergency room. Nurse Sarah tells me you've refused to treat a patient." Dr. Ashton met his gaze, unflinching. "That's correct. I have a prior engagement. A prior engagement that takes precedence over a life-threatening emergency." Mr. Peterson challenged, his voice rising slightly. "This hospital has a mission, Dr. Ashton. We are here to provide care to everyone who needs it, regardless of their race or background." "I am well aware of the hospital's mission, Mr. Peterson," Dr. Ashton replied, his tone laced with disdain. "However, I also have a right to choose who I treat. I'm not comfortable operating on that man." He didn't need to say the word black. It hung in the air between them, thick and heavy. "Comfortable," Mr. Peterson repeated, his voice incredulous. "This isn't about comfort, Dr. Ashton. This is about a man's life. This is about our oath as doctors. This is about the very principles this hospital was founded upon." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Are you telling me that your personal prejudices are more important than saving a human life?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Dr. Ashton straightened his shoulders, his eyes hardening with defiance. "My personal beliefs are just that, Mr. Peterson, personal. I am entitled to them. I am a highly skilled surgeon, sought after by patients from all over the state. I bring prestige and revenue to this hospital." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee as if to emphasize his importance. "If you're suggesting that I am obligated to compromise my principles to appease certain segments of the population, then I must respectfully disagree. I will not be bullied into acting against my conscience." Mr. Peterson stared at him, his disappointment deepening. "This isn't about appeasement, Dr. Ashton. This is about doing what is right." "Right according to whom?" Dr. Ashton retorted, his voice rising. "According to you? According to some bleeding-heart liberal agenda? I have my own standards, and I intend to uphold them." He slammed his coffee cup down on the table, the sound echoing in the small room. "If you find my position unacceptable, Mr. Peterson, then perhaps it is time for me to seek employment elsewhere. I am confident that I will have no trouble finding a hospital that appreciates my unique perspective." He stood up, his gaze unwavering. "Consider this my formal warning. If you push this matter further, I will resign." He turned and walked towards the door, leaving Mr. Peterson standing alone, grappling with the implications of Dr. Ashton's blatant defiance. The administrator knew he was facing a critical decision, one that could have profound consequences for the hospital and the community it served. As Dr. Ashton reached the doorway, Mr. Peterson spoke, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Before you walk out that door, Doctor, there's something you should know." Dr. Ashton paused, turning back with a look of bored indifference. "And what is that, Mr. Peterson? More lectures on morality?" Mr. Peterson took a deep breath. "Do you know who Elijah Johnson's father is?" Dr. Ashton frowned. "I haven't the slightest idea, nor do I care." His name is Mr. Samuel Johnson, Mr. Peterson stated, watching Dr. Ashton's face carefully. He's a very successful businessman, owns several printing presses throughout the South. A flicker of recognition crossed Dr. Ashton's face, quickly replaced by a dismissive shrug. So, Mr. Peterson continued, his voice gaining emphasis. Mr. Samuel Johnson is also the primary benefactor of this hospital. For the past 5 years, he has single-handedly kept us afloat with his generous donations. And when he made those donations, he made one thing crystal clear, that this hospital must serve everyone, regardless of their race, creed, or color. He specifically insisted on it. The silence in the room was now deafening. Dr. Ashton's face had gone pale, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The weight of Mr. Peterson's words hung heavy in the air, shattering the carefully constructed facade of indifference he had maintained. The foundation of his defiance had just crumbled beneath his feet. He had unknowingly condemned the son of the man who held the hospital's future in his hands. The color drained completely from Dr. Ashton's face. His carefully constructed world, built on a foundation of prejudice and privilege, suddenly began to crumble. He realized the gravity of his situation. His career, his reputation, everything he had worked for was now hanging by a thread. He had always considered himself untouchable, a star surgeon whose skills were indispensable. He believed the hospital needed him more than he needed it. But Mr. Peterson's revelation had shattered that illusion. He understood now that his arrogance had blinded him to the true power dynamics at play. He thought of Mr. Samuel Johnson, a man he had only vaguely heard of, a name mentioned in passing during board meetings. He had dismissed him as just another wealthy donor, never truly appreciating the extent of his influence. Now, he understood that Mr. Johnson's generosity was the lifeblood of the hospital, and he had just jeopardized everything by refusing to treat his son. The thought of losing his position, of being ostracized by his colleagues, of having his reputation tarnished, filled him with a cold dread. He imagined the whispers, the disapproving glances, the closed doors. He could see his carefully cultivated career slipping through his fingers. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. The defiant glint in his eyes had vanished, replaced by a flicker of fear. He knew he had to act quickly, to salvage what he could from this disastrous situation. The arrogance that had fueled his prejudice was now replaced by a desperate calculation. He had to save his career, even if it meant swallowing his pride and betraying his own hateful beliefs. Dr. Ashton turned back to Mr. Peterson, his voice now subdued. I'll do the surgery." The words felt like ash in his mouth. Mr. Peterson nodded, his expression unreadable. "I expect nothing less, doctor, and I expect you to give it your all." Dr. Ashton rushed towards the operating room, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He was motivated by self-preservation, not compassion. He scrubbed in, his hands trembling slightly. As he entered the operating room, he saw Elijah lying on the table, his face pale and still. The monitors continued their ominous beeping. Despite his best efforts to compartmentalize his prejudice, it seeped into his actions. His focus wavered. His usually steady hands became clumsy. He fumbled with the instruments, his movements jerky and imprecise. The nurses noticed his hesitation, the subtle errors he was making. His internal biases clouded his judgment, making it difficult for him to assess the situation objectively. He found himself second-guessing his decisions, his confidence shaken. He was still a skilled surgeon, but his prejudice acted as a corrosive agent, undermining his abilities and jeopardizing Elijah's life. The very hate that had driven him to refuse treatment was now threatening to make him fail even if he tried. He was trapped. Nurse Sarah, ever vigilant, noticed Dr. Ashton's faltering performance. She saw the tremor in his hands, the hesitation in his movements, the subtle errors that could prove fatal. She understood that his prejudice was undermining his skill, and she knew she had to do something to help. She couldn't openly challenge him, not in front of the other nurses, not without risking further destabilizing the situation. Instead, she offered subtle corrections, gentle guidance, and unwavering support. She anticipated his needs, handing him instruments before he even asked, correcting his positioning with a barely perceptible touch. "Doctor, perhaps a slightly larger clamp would provide better purchase," she suggested quietly, her voice calm and reassuring. "Doctor, the angle of the retractor could be adjusted slightly to improve visibility," she murmured, her eyes never leaving the surgical field. Her suggestions were so subtle, so tactful, that they could be interpreted as mere assistance. But Dr. Ashton knew exactly what she was doing. She was compensating for his prejudice, filling in the gaps created by his clouded judgment. She was a lifeline, pulling him back from the brink of disaster. She was acting not only as a nurse, but as a silent guardian, protecting Elijah from the very man who was supposed to be saving him. Her quiet competence was a stark contrast to Dr. Ashton's inner turmoil, a testament to her unwavering commitment to her patients, regardless of their race or the doctor's prejudices. The hours in the operating room stretched on, each minute feeling like an eternity. The atmosphere was thick with tension, a palpable weight pressing down on everyone present. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was a constant reminder of Elijah's precarious state, a relentless drumbeat counting down the seconds of his life. Dr. Ashton, with Nurse Sarah's subtle guidance, fought to repair the damage to Elijah's body. He meticulously stitched torn tissues, painstakingly pieced together shattered bones, and carefully addressed the life-threatening head trauma. Sweat poured down his face, blurring his vision. He was physically and mentally exhausted, but he knew he couldn't afford to falter. Outside the operating room, Mr. Peterson paced anxiously, his worry etched on his face. He knew that the fate of the hospital, as well as Elijah's life, hung in the balance. He could only hope that Dr. Ashton, despite his personal failings, possessed the skill and determination to pull Elijah through. The other nurses in the hospital waited with bated breath, their prayers and hopes focused on the operating room. They knew Elijah, they knew his dreams, they knew the injustice he had faced. They longed for a positive outcome, a sign that compassion and skill could triumph over prejudice and hate. The entire hospital held its breath, suspended in a state of anxious anticipation, as Elijah's life hung in the balance. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Ashton stepped back from the operating table, his body slumped with exhaustion. He peeled off his gloves, his hands still trembling slightly. He looked at Nurse Sarah, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "He's stable," he said, his voice hoarse. The surgery was successful. A collective sigh of relief swept through the operating room. The nurses exchanged weary smiles, their faces illuminated with joy. The tension that had gripped them for hours finally began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of profound gratitude. The monitors beeped steadily, reflecting Elijah's improved condition. His breathing was still shallow, but his pulse was stronger, more regular. He was still unconscious, but he was alive. He had survived. Outside the operating room, Mr. Peterson received the news with a visible sense of relief. His shoulders relaxed, and a faint smile touched his lips. The hospital was safe, at least for now. The word spread quickly throughout the hospital, bringing a wave of joy and celebration. The nurses hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. They had witnessed a miracle, a testament to the power of skill, determination, and compassion. Elijah was stable, his life spared, but the battle was far from over. He still faced a long and arduous recovery, but he had been given a second chance, a chance to fulfill his dreams and make his mark on the world. And that, in itself, was a victory. In the quiet solitude of the doctor's lounge, Dr. Thomas Ashton sat slumped in a chair, utterly drained. The exhaustion was more than physical. It was a weariness that seeped into his soul. The events of the past few hours replayed in his mind, each scene a painful reminder of his own failings. He thought of Elijah, lying helpless on the operating table, his life hanging by a thread. He thought of his own initial refusal to treat him, fueled by nothing more than blind prejudice. He thought of Nurse Sarah's quiet competence, her unwavering dedication, her subtle guidance that had helped him navigate the treacherous surgery. And then he thought of Mr. Samuel Johnson, the man whose generosity had kept the hospital afloat, the man whose son he had almost allowed to die. The irony was almost unbearable. He had condemned a man based on the color of his skin, only to discover that the man's father was the very reason the hospital was able to function. He began to question the beliefs he had held for so long, the prejudices he had allowed to fester within him. Was he truly superior? Was he truly justified in judging others based on their race? He had always prided himself on his intelligence, his logic, his rationality. But now, he realized that his prejudice had blinded him to the truth, had warped his judgment, had turned him into something less than a man. He felt a deep sense of shame, a gnawing guilt that threatened to consume him. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and he knew that his life would never be the same. As Dr. Ashton sat lost in his thoughts, Mr. Samuel Johnson arrived at the hospital. He was a distinguished-looking man, his face etched with worry, but his eyes filled with a quiet strength. He approached Mr. Peterson, his voice filled with a mixture of anxiety and hope. "How is my son?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Is he going to be all right?" Mr. Peterson assured him that Elijah was stable and recovering. Dr. Ashton performed the surgery. It was a long and difficult procedure, but he did an excellent job. "Your son is in good hands." Mr. Peterson carefully omitted any mention of Dr. Ashton's initial reluctance. Mr. Johnson's face lit up with relief. "Thank God," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I am eternally grateful to Dr. Ashton and the entire staff for saving my son's life." He insisted on seeing Dr. Ashton personally to express his gratitude. Mr. Peterson hesitated, glancing nervously towards the doctor's lounge. He knew that confronting Dr. Ashton with Mr. Johnson would be an awkward and potentially volatile situation. However, he couldn't deny Mr. Johnson's request. He had a right to thank the man who had saved his son's life, even if that man had initially wanted nothing to do with him. He went to fetch Dr. Ashton, bracing himself for the inevitable confrontation. Mr. Peterson led a reluctant Dr. Ashton to where Mr. Johnson was waiting. Dr. Ashton stood back slightly, observing the interaction from a distance. He watched as Mr. Johnson extended his hand, his face radiating genuine gratitude. "Dr. Ashton," Mr. Johnson said, his voice warm and sincere, "I cannot thank you enough for saving my son's life. You're a true hero." Dr. Ashton hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly shook Mr. Johnson's hand. He mumbled a perfunctory, "You're welcome," his eyes avoiding Mr. Johnson's gaze. He watched as Mr. Johnson spoke of Elijah's dreams, his aspirations, his plans for the future. He saw the love and pride in Mr. Johnson's eyes, the unwavering belief in his son's potential. He realized that Mr. Johnson was not just a wealthy benefactor, but a devoted father, a man who cared deeply about his family and his community. A wave of shame washed over Dr. Ashton. He had almost deprived this man of his son, not because of any legitimate reason, but because of his own twisted prejudice. He had almost destroyed a family, shattered a dream, all because of the color of someone's skin. But amidst the shame, Dr. Ashton also felt a grudging respect for Mr. Johnson. He admired his quiet dignity, his unwavering gratitude, his unwavering belief in the goodness of humanity. He saw a man who had overcome adversity, who had achieved success despite the obstacles placed in his path. He realized that Mr. Johnson was everything he was not, a man of integrity, a man of compassion, a man who saw beyond the superficial differences that divided people. Later that evening, as the hospital quieted down, Nurse Sarah found Dr. Ashton in the deserted cafeteria, staring out the window. She approached him cautiously, her expression serious. "Dr. Ashton," she began, her voice soft but firm, "I need to talk to you." Dr. Ashton turned, his face weary. "I suppose you do. What you did today, it was wrong," Sarah said, her voice unwavering. "You almost let a man die because of the color of his skin. That's not the kind of doctor I thought you were." Dr. Ashton sighed. "I know, nurse. I know. Knowing isn't enough, Doctor, Sarah countered. You have to change. You have to confront your prejudices and overcome them. You have to learn to see people as individuals, not as stereotypes. She paused, her eyes filled with compassion. I saw you in the operating room today, Doctor. I saw your struggle. I know you're capable of being a better man than you showed today. But it's up to you to make that choice. It's not easy, nurse, Dr. Ashton said, his voice barely a whisper. I know it's not easy, Sarah replied, but it's necessary. The world is changing, doctor, and you need to change with it. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your patients, and you owe it to humanity. She left him standing alone in the cafeteria, her words hanging heavy in the air, a challenge and a plea for him to embrace a better version of himself. Dr. Thomas Ashton remained in the cafeteria long after Nurse Sarah had left, her words echoing in his mind. He stared out at the darkened city, the lights twinkling like distant stars. He thought about everything that had happened that day, the accident, his refusal, Nurse Sarah's challenge, Mr. Peterson's revelation, Mr. Johnson's gratitude. He knew that he couldn't simply ignore what had happened. He couldn't pretend that his prejudice hadn't almost cost a young man his life. He couldn't continue to live a lie, clinging to outdated beliefs that had no place in the modern world. The journey would be long and difficult. He knew he would face resistance from within himself, from the ingrained biases that had shaped his worldview for so long. He knew he would stumble, he would falter, he would question whether he was truly capable of change. But he also knew that he had to try. He owed it to himself, he owed it to Elijah, he owed it to Nurse Sarah, he owed it to Mr. Johnson, and he owed it to the future. He had to start by questioning his own beliefs, by challenging his own assumptions, by opening his mind to new perspectives. He had to learn to see the world through a different lens, a lens that was not clouded by prejudice, but illuminated by compassion and understanding. It was a small step, but it was a start. He had begun his slow journey toward overcoming his prejudice, a journey that would transform him from a flawed and bigoted man into someone worthy of respect, someone capable of truly making a difference in the world. The process wouldn't be quick, easy, or painless, but he knew, deep down, that it was the only path forward.